What's up, YouTube? This is 82 and welcome back. So, continuing on my series on how good players would be in different times, today I'm going to talk about Michael Jordan. Now, how good would Jordan be in today's era? This is something a fan submitted question to me. I think the biggest change between Jordan's era, specifically the late 90s, and 2022, the late 90s were much slower paced, a lot more ISO ball, and, hand checking. They had hand checking, they had zone defenses. So, for example, Jordan and Karl Malone are the only players in the 90s to average above 30 points per game. So, let's just say for a minute Jordan was drafted in 2014, right? And that would put him currently around the time of his original second championship, because he was drafted in 84. He won his first championship in 91, second championship in 92. So what would his career look like nowadays? Well, I think he could very well, as I said in my Wilt Chamberlain video, I don't think any player today is going to average 50 points per game. I've heard people say Jordan would average 70, 80. I think that's ridiculous. I could definitely see him, though, averaging, because he averaged 37 points per game in the 80s without really relying on a 3-point shot. And one critique that people have about Jordan was his 3-point shooting. And they just act like he's a bum because he wasn't the best 3-point shooter. But the thing is, look at how many players today haven't had a 3-point shot that developed it, right? Like Al Horford or Blake Griffin, They're not even 1/10 the player that Jordan was. So I think with the way Jordan's work ethic was, he could very well work on his shot. He was originally drafted in 84, like I said. Let's just say he was drafted in 2014. It's, and he grew up in this timeline. It's very well possible he'd be a great outside shot, because he didn't come into the league a great mid-range shooter, and he became probably the greatest mid-range shooter of all time. And like I said, it was his hand size, his vertical leap. It made him a freak above everybody else in his era. And he would be a freak in today's era too. Now, I could see him averaging on a bad team, like his early days, right? I could see him averaging, at the most, and people can crucify me if they want in the comments. I don't care. I could see him putting up 40 points per game. I really could. On a bad team. Doing like what Kobe did in 06. Or Kobe averaged like 36. I could see Jordan putting up that. But I don't think his numbers are going to be like that every single year. Just like it wasn't in the actual timeline he played. And some people like to say, well, Jordan wouldn't be effective in today's era just because of how his game was. Well, you have guys like DeMar DeRozan who were in the MVP race, who have a great mid-range game. And he's not even a good defender like Jordan was. You got guys like Kawhi Leonard that play pretty similar to Jordan, So I think it's quite possible that Jordan would be the best player in today's league, especially, the past couple years, as defenses became it became easier for offensive players to score, and I remember in the 2018-19 season how people were just oohing and eyeing about how many 40, 50-point games there were compared to how many there were in the 90s. And they just say, see, players today are so much more talented than back then. Well, you're not looking at the whole context of the style of play. It was a slower pace back then, tougher defense, more things were allowed defensively. So Jordan would have, I don't think I'm crazy to say this, I think he'd be the scoring leader every year that he plays if he played in the modern era from 2014 to now. But how many championships would he win? Well, it all depends on where he's drafted at. I think his personality would be the same in that he'd be like a killer instinct, out for blood, not trying to make friends. So let's say he's drafted to, trying to think of a scenario. I mean, if somebody else has a different scenario they could come up with, because he's going to be good on any team, but let's just say he was drafted in 2014 to the Chicago Bulls, right? Jimmy Butler was still there. What if they built a team around Jimmy Butler and Michael Jordan? And I know some people are going to say Jimmy Butler plays like Michael Jordan. Well, Jimmy Butler had some really good games, especially this year. Like, if you remember his Game 6 and Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals this year. Yeah, I'd say he has some killer instinct DNA in him. Or if you look at his 2020 playoff run, but he's just not Jordan, Some stuff you can't really read on a stat. Some stuff you can't really determine based on a stat sheet. And I think Jimmy Butler is really meant to be like a second star. So let's say they build the team around them, the 2014-15 season. I'm trying to think who else was there during that time. Did they have Pau Gasol during that time? I think he was there. Let's say they, give him Derrick Rose, because I think Derrick Rose was still there. I don't think he was traded yet. Yes, he was already having his injuries and whatnot. But I could see Jordan winning 2 championships just up until this point. But I think as his career would have went on, I could see him still winning 6. I don't see why not, as long as he's got a good supporting cast. And I think he would have the scoring title, multiple scoring titles, just like he did in this real life scenario. I do think he would win more than one Defensive Player of the Year just because of how good he was defensively. And I think that would be one thing that would kind of hurt him a little bit too, in that nowadays they're a lot stricter on defenders, right? He'd have to be more smart on how he guards people. But I do think he would still win 2 Defensive Players of the Year if he played today. And I could see him, it'd be really awesome to see like an NBA Finals matchup between LeBron on the Lakers versus Jordan on the Bulls. Maybe if they kept Jimmy Butler and I'm just making up a scenario about Jordan being on the Bulls. You put him on any team that was bad during that time. So the point I'm trying to get across is I think Jordan would still be just as effective today, even more, with the way the game is elevated in terms of opening up and defenses becoming more restricted. And another thing I could say about Jordan would be in today's era, which I don't think a lot of people would think about when they're factoring this, is his brand I don't think would be the same. And what I mean by that is there wasn't any social media when Jordan was at his peak, right? And let's just be fair here. Michael Jordan was known for not being the nicest person. You know, he wasn't very nice to fans a lot of the time. He wasn't very nice to teammates. I think if there was social media, like him playing today was the way social media is, I'm not trying to get political here. I don't think Jordan would be as liked as he was in the 90s. I'm not saying he wouldn't have fans or anything like that. I'm saying a lot of people would hate the guy for his personality. Like you see LeBron, for example. Say what you want about LeBron as a player. You know, I'm not a big fan. But there's really no scandals about LeBron off the court, right? And look at how social media just attacks him all the time. So, what do you think they would do to Jordan with all his scandals? So, that's just another factor to look at. I don't know if his brand would be as big. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that. That's just my 2 cents. So, let me know what you guys think down below. How good do you think Jordan would be in the modern era? Do you think he would win 6 championships? How many MVPs do you think he would win? I could see him winning like 3 MVPs, maybe 4, 6. I can still see him winning 6 championships, but let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.